MSNBC Foments Unrest and no dumbest bill in America. This is Mark Fisher with Mark and the Millennials, and the Millennial joining me today is, of course, Christopher Hopkins on the other side of the camera. And we would like to welcome everyone to this episode of Mark and the Millennials. And we are calling it MSNBC Foments Unrest. And I have a theory about why the mainstream media, not to mention the President of the United States, wants to foment unrest currently, right before the election. And I just want to say for the record that fomenting unrest is always a very bad idea. It's wrong in every way possible, yet we see the mainstream media doing this. And the question that I have for you podcast listeners is why? Why is the left-wing mainstream media trying to foment unrest? What do they gain? What does anyone gain from that? Well, don't believe me, just listen in a minute, setting this up. So we have, of course, the MSNBC host, Tiffany Cross, and she just came out, I think it was yesterday, or the day before, with some ideas of her own about, fomenting unrest. And we have that clip, and here it is.
I'm Tiffany Cross. And these days, it feels like we are not just at the brink of a civil war, but that one has already begun.
And if they try to prosecute President Trump for mishandling classified information after Hillary Clinton set up a server in her basement, they literally will be riots in the street. I worry about our country.
They've turned into the American Gestapo. MAGA is a direct threat to the, wait for it, the American state. You said this quiet part out loud. We are a threat to the American state.
So Trump supporters are already speaking the language of violence. They're threatening the FBI, the DOJ, the state itself, and this is all as they defend their dear leader. Now, it's more than just threats, though. Their rhetoric has already led to actual violence, and there is likely more to come. And I don't need to remind you how the MAGA mob sacked the Capitol on January 6th in an effort to overturn the 2020 election. Now, some of these people are now candidates for office, looking to run our elections and, quite frankly, our government. And for those insurrectionists being prosecuted, Discount Don is, quote, financially supporting some of them and offering to pardon the lot if he's reelected in 2024. More than 40% of Americans think a civil war is likely in the next decade. That's a big number. Is this where history will say it began?
Yes. Is this where history will say it began? Namely, civil war at MSNBC. Is it history? Will history say that MSNBC caused the next one to happen, the next civil war to happen? This is sick. This is really sick, MSNBC. This is really sick, mainstream media, to foment civil unrest. And so I ask you the question, podcast listeners, why is MSNBC trying to foment unrest? And the answer is right there in front of us, because as Tiffany says on MSNBC, you cannot forget those insurrectionists on January 6th. And we have a president of the United States that called half of the country semi-fascists. Then we have Hillary Clinton that is also hitting the wires as well, talking the same talking points. And coincidentally, or not, we have the FBI who is raiding people's homes who are pro-life, raiding people's homes who were in the former president's administration, and generally speaking, only raiding people's homes, at least it certainly seems, who have a political point of view that is right of center. And I want to make this very clear, podcast listeners, and to all listeners in different government agencies. I believe that the rank and file FBI agents are trustworthy and wonderful. I think that something is very wrong at the top of the FBI. These are the individuals who are coordinating with the Justice Department and shaking down, of course, people who are right of center because they dare to speak out. So you have MSNBC saying that there might be a civil war and that the Republicans are the ones who are talking about it and or trying to cause it. You have the FBI who are going after people who are right of center. You have Hillary Clinton saying the same thing. You have many Democrats parroting the same thing. And then you have the President of the United States of America saying that half the country are semi-fascists. All of this is coordinated. Of course it's coordinated. It's coordinated because the Democrats are so badly behind in the polls that their hope is that the way they win your vote is not because of their failed policies. And if you notice, they can't even talk about their failed policies because they're not talking about it at all. They're hoping to win your vote because they're going to try to convince you the other side is scary. The other side doesn't believe in democracy. The other side might start a civil war. The other side might engage in an insurrection. Folks, look, you have a mainstream media that is literally sick. And I know that MSNBC, of course, they have an audience, but really, do you really have to go there? Do you really have to demonize half the country and talk about people who are families, who are pro-life, who love children, who believe in procreation? Do you have to, are they fomenting civil war? I mean, it's just ridiculous. So why is MSNBC so crazily saying this kind of stuff? Namely, that so many Americans think that there might be a civil war. Why does MSNBC do this? Well, ladies and gentlemen, and podcast listeners, listen to this, okay? We have articles that have been coming out over the past week or so. Here's one. GOP voters are virtually impossible to poll after Biden's mega Republican speech, the top pollster said. Now, we talked about this previously, but very briefly. Polls may significantly undercount, and this is in the Epic Times. You're sure as heck not going to read this in the Baltimore Sun or the Los Angeles Times, but you might read it in the Wall Street Journal and the Epic Times. Polls may significantly undercount Republican voters and supporters of former President Donald Trump following President Joe Biden's speech that attacked mega Republicans earlier this month, according to a top independent pollster. So Trafalgar Group, they are trying to figure out what is going to happen in this election, like all pollsters do, so they know where to target money and who to help. You know, who's ahead? Okay, let's help them get over the finish line. Who's close to the other person who might be slightly ahead? Well, then let's help them. But if someone's really far behind, then forget it. We're going to throw in the towel and reallocate the money in races that we can actually win. Well, that's the whole purpose of polling. Polling helps people know where to target money in political races during elections. So Trafalgar Group is like, well, wait a minute. We're polling and we simply cannot figure out what is going on out there because people aren't talking to us. People aren't answering our questions about what they're thinking. And the reason is pretty simple. Because you have the MSNBC host saying that if you dare to have an alternative opinion about any issue of the day, any issues, abortion, the Ukraine war, big tech, the economy, gasoline versus electric vehicles, climate change, if you dare to have any kind of alternative opinion to the conventional left-wing wisdom, then you are somehow an enemy of the state. You are somehow an insurrectionist. You are a danger. And we're going to get the FBI after you. Ladies and gentlemen, this is literally why people aren't talking to the media. This is literally why the average Joe out there is not talking to the pollsters. They're terrified of letting people know what they think. And so in the Daily Caller, here's another one. Mega Republicans seek to destroy the United States of America, senior Biden advisor claims. So, right? So if you are a Republican and you may support Governor DeSantis, or you may support Governor Abbott, or you may support Donald Trump. You may be a Republican who doesn't support Donald Trump, but supports Abbott or supports DeSantis. But you are nonetheless a Republican. You may still feel safer by not telling anyone anything about who you support. And this is the issue, because you have articles like this and individuals like this who are saying that mega Republicans are seeking to destroy the United States of America. So what the Democrats are trying to do is to say anyone who's a Republican is a mega Republican. Remember what a mega is. Make America great again. My wife always corrects me. She says, Mark, it's actually MAGA. I like mega. I don't know. It just sounds, it's easier to say than MAGA. But make America great again. Imagine who would be threatened by that. You're right. I want to make our country great again. How dare you? You're an insurrectionist. So we have this article. It says, a senior advisor to President Joe Biden's MAGA, I said it right that time, Republicans pose a danger to our democracy and seek to destroy the United States of America. This individual said this during this past Sunday morning's appearance on, of course, MSNBC. Quote, it's important that as we look at the MAGA Republican agenda and those who seek to lead our country, like Kevin McCarthy, who will lead our country if Republicans take the House in November, it's important that we pay attention to what the agenda will be. Former Democrat Mayor Keisha Lance Bottoms of Atlanta, now a senior advisor to President Joe Biden, told host Jonathan Capehart, quote, this MAGA Republican agenda is a very dangerous agenda. So here is Keisha Bottoms, the former mayor of Atlanta, right, who ran a once great city into the ground, where you have crime that's out of control. How she still can be a Democrat, I have no idea, but fine. That's her prerogative. But she's now saying that MAGA Republicans are dangerous, including Kevin McCarthy. Now, folks, I think most people never really thought of Kevin McCarthy as a MAGA Republican. Not that I'm aware of. Yes, he's the likely Speaker of the House if the Republicans take over the United States House of Representatives. But most Republicans I know never looked at Kevin McCarthy as being like a super MAGA type. Nonetheless, you see what they're doing. If you're a Republican, there's a nexus between you and anything and everything that has to do with the insurrection, which is, of course, absolutely absurd, ladies and gentlemen, because no one really wants to talk in detail about what caused many of those people to even show up on January 6th. They showed up on January 6th because of all the change in election laws that happened because of COVID at the very last minute. And we've spoken about this at length before, but the Democrats are still talking this talk about, and so is the media, about how the Republicans are a danger to society, and therefore you can't trust them. You cannot trust them. So speaking of dangers, we have this, the libs of TikTok tweeted out, and we don't have any kind of sound in this clip that we wanted to play for you. But if you want to watch it, Chris can maybe put this up. It's the libs of TikTok, and it says, a large group of criminals ransacked a Wawa store tonight in Philadelphia. So this was just a couple of days ago. And the libs of TikTok put this video up. And folks, you cannot believe what you're seeing. It is essentially a Wawa where people are just, a couple of dozen people are going crazy in the Wawa, just stealing and looting everything. In some cases, standing on, furniture or standing on displays and just acting like they're out of control because they are out of control. This is in Philadelphia. Okay, a city that is literally out of control. And you look at this picture and everyone in the picture, okay, sadly, very sadly, sad state of affairs in our inner cities. But everyone in this picture who's looting and destroying the Wawa is black. And Mark Fisher will say this. Most people won't. There's a problem, folks. Where is their mom and dad? Right? And I'm telling you this story because we are being told by the left and, by the way, by big corporations that there aren't enough people in the United States today to fill all the jobs. There aren't enough electricians, there aren't enough plumbers, there aren't enough carpenters, there aren't enough roofers, there aren't enough technical people, there aren't enough people who are in any of the computer science fields, there aren't enough cyber people. This is what we're being told. And therefore, that's why our borders are open. But meanwhile, we have a mass number of people in the United States who are not employed. So why does that matter? Because here I am watching this video, which Chris has put up, of all of these individuals in a Wawa store in downtown Philadelphia, literally picking it clean of everything that's in the store, whether these individuals need the stuff or not. Whole nother story. And not a single one of them is going to be held to account for their actions. To which I say, whatever happened to like the common sense justice system where you would have police and they would round every single one of these individuals up. They'd book them. They'd make them spend the night in jail, regardless of whether they were minors, but they would separate the minors together in jail, obviously, safely, ladies and gentlemen. Come on, safely. But they would see what it's like to spend a night in jail. And then when they had their day in court, since this is all in video, so you know who it is, it's kind of like a no-brainer. You'd have your day in court, and a good judge would say, you know what you're going to do? You're not only going to pay restitution, but you're going to pay restitution by working. There we go, ladies and gentlemen. This is what happens when you have a society where you don't have fathers in the household. It's true. Because a good dad would say to their child who just engaged in some awful behavior, such as looting in a store, you know what you're going to do? You're going to go back to that store. You're going to return everything. I'm going to go with you, and I'm going to make you take out the trash and clean the bathrooms in that store for the next 6 months on weekends or on a couple of weeknights a week, weeknights during the week. That's what a good dad would do, and that's what a judge should do, because since these individuals, I'm sure, by and large, don't have dads. Yes, I did say that because it's true. Huge percentage don't of these individuals. And I say these individuals because it is a problem in our inner city. Black individuals who don't have dads in the household. There's no respect for the law. There's no respect for private property. There's no respect for anything. And I'm not saying all, I'm just saying large groups, though, that are causing these problems, like in Wawa. And why aren't they being told by courts, which of course are not even being arrested to begin with, which is a whole other issue. Why aren't they being told by the courts, yes, you got to clean the bathrooms. Yes, you have to take out the trash. You have to do all of the unpleasant things of a job to demonstrate that, when you're being paid $12 an hour, or what the Democrats want $20 an hour, pay them $12 an hour. Because honestly, that's probably the going rate, or what it should be. You're being paid $12 an hour. And at that point in time, when you finally pay off all the stuff and damage that you did and mayhem that you caused, then you're free to go. And you know what the teaching moment is there? What a great teaching moment. The teaching moment would be very, very simple. Teaching moment. Hey, look, ladies and gentlemen, the teaching moment is you have to work. You actually have to work if you want something. You have to exchange your work and your skills and your sweat and your time in exchange for getting products. And there's a teaching moment that shockingly is rarely taught in households, because in those single parent households, particularly those households where there's no dad whatsoever involved in their lives, the moms are so busy trying to just make ends meet and pay bills. There is very little time, sadly, to raise the children. I understand that, okay? But there has to be a consequence. You must have skin in the game when you actually engage in this kind of terrible behavior. So what my purpose in bringing this up, ladies and gentlemen, is we started this podcast by saying MSNBC and the mainstream media is fomenting unrest. But yet the unrest that we're seeing is coming from the left in America's inner cities. It's coming from the left where there's mass looting and violence in America's cities. That's not the right looting. Those aren't Republicans looting in Wawa. I'm sorry, they're not. It's the Democrats who looted, raped, burned, and pillaged all through 2020 and are continuing to this day. So if you want to talk about mainstream media and MSNBC, if you want to talk about a civil war and that it's already begun, yeah, it probably began in 2020 on the left. When there was mass rioting in the major cities, many of the major cities across the country, and you had businesses in those places that just had to shut down for months at a time. People wouldn't even drive through those areas. Because what was that area called in Washington State? What did they call that?
Chaz.
The Chaz. They had their own government in which city was it? Was it Seattle?
Yeah,
I think it was Seattle, or where Chaz was established. Chaz was like a self-governing group of kind of an oxymoron of a bunch of idiots that, of course, have never really had jobs and decided that they were going to feed themselves by looting the local stores, but they were also going to be self-governing, in the middle of a city, and everything would just turn out fine. You don't need to take care of the water mains or the electricity, or that's not necessary. It's, everything will be good. Well, yeah, so MSNBC is correct. The civil war that has begun is a civil war that began in 2020 when the Democrat Party decided to change election laws at the very last minute and decided to loot, burn, and pillage cities in America. And that continues today. It continues to this day. And it is why we have so many submerged voters, as they are called, in the United States. Submerged voters who see TikTok videos like what happened in the Wawa in downtown Philadelphia and realize that is not an aberration. That is happening in America's cities kind of all the time. So are murders, stabbings, beatings, carjackings. All of these things are happening. And Republicans know this is happening. So do unaffiliated. And by the way, to be fair, so do a good amount of Democrats who are also unhappy. And they realize this is not a good direction for the United States of America. And they're terrified, Republicans in particular, because they're being vilified by the Biden administration and also, quite frankly, by the reign of terror by the FBI upper echelon. So terrified are they that they're just submerged voters. That is to say, they are hiding what they are really thinking and feeling. And therefore, they want to have their day when they actually show up for the midterms. That's their day. That is their day. And that is the day of true reckoning, of course, with all, and I mean all, of these bad Democrats. Look, I think it's Patty Murray. Is that her name? The U.S. Senator in Washington State. She's even in trouble. Folks, Washington State is a far left, crazy place. But that is just the major cities. The rest of the state is conservative. Like many places in the United States, of course. Unfortunately, the far left has taken over Washington State. Patty Murray is a United States Senator from Washington State and has been for a long time. She actually is in a dead heat for the United States Senate to keep her seat. In other words, the Republican actually might beat her in November. That's unheard of. That's unheard of. So yeah, there are a lot of submerged voters. And there are a lot of unhappy Democrats and tons of unhappy, unaffiliated, and independents across the United States who have just said, we have had enough of this. Stop saying that a civil war has begun by people who are Republicans simply because you disagree with what they think, because the Republicans aren't looting. No, they're not. They want rule of law. That's really what they want. And by telling the Republicans that wanting the rule of law is wrong or somehow dangerous, just makes things worse for everyone. So next up, podcast listeners, we have an interesting story. This was on Tucker Carlson, but we're going to talk about this briefly. The balloon busted teacher. Yes, the balloon busted teacher, ladies and gentlemen. This is a true story. So there is a school board that actually thinks it's okay for a very large, big balloon busty trans teacher to stay in the classroom and teach teenage boys and girls. So get this. The normalization of radical LGBT agendas overtaking public school systems took center stage when the oversized prosthetic breasts of a transgender teacher grabbed international headlines and sparked widespread outrage. So, Chris, if you could put a picture of that up while we're talking about it. Sure. Because, ladies and gentlemen, these words that I just read don't do this picture justice. So there is a teacher of this individual at Oakville Trafalgar High School in Canada who regularly shows up to class wearing outrageously large fake breasts with noticeably offensive nipples prominently displayed under her very tight, clinging clothes, invading students' personal space and causing general tumult. There's only one thing, ladies and gentlemen. This teacher is a dude. Okay? The teacher is a dude. He teaches shop. So the teacher teaches shop at this school in Oakville, in Canada. He's a high school shop teacher. And he's decided to, I presume, wear a wig and identify as a woman, but that isn't enough for him. He has put on this massive prosthesis of breasts that, and Chris has put it up, the picture. You cannot believe it. Any normal human being would say this individual ought not be in the classroom. They ought to be in medical counseling. They ought to be in counseling, like, you know, for a psychiatrist or something. I'm not really sure, but certainly not in the high school. So you have a picture of this teacher who is teaching shop class and is using like what is that saw called? That saw that you bring down that cuts the wood. I always forget it. You know, it's like the table saw. Thank you. See, I failed shop class, by the way. So there's a table saw, and this teacher is showing the students, the teenage boys, because it's mostly, let's face it, teenage boys that take shop class. I'm not saying girls don't take shop class, but typically the only reason why girls would do it is to meet dudes. Usually back in high school, when I was in high school. Now it's primarily guys. Let's face it. Come on. Except for the teacher who's, well, of course, the teacher's a dude as well. So the teacher has these massive fake breasts and is showing, and the breasts are so huge, they're literally in the way of whatever the teacher does. And he's got the saw, the table saw, and showing the students how to use the table saw, but the breasts are in the way because they're fake and they're massive in a public high school in Canada. So Andy No tweets out, viral images of a trans teacher wearing oversized breasts that sag to the waist have been investigated. The tech teacher is Kayla Lemieux of Oakville Trafalgar High School in Ontario, Canada. The school stands by its teacher, and so does the school board. The school board thinks this is okay, and the school itself thinks this is okay. Now, you would think that this would be a joke, right? Back in maybe just a decade ago, if a student did this, a high school student, a minor, they would be sent home and they would be indeed told that, this is inappropriate. Keep in mind the size of these things. It's clearly, you have to see this again to believe it. But the individual is a dude, okay, but calls himself Kayla Lemieux. Yeah, nice French name. Again, Andy, no. Some students have recorded images of the trans teacher at Oakville Trafalgar High School in Ontario, Canada, and put them on social media. And then this one picture, of course, again. And the video is of the teacher using the table saw and showing students how to cut wood, which is kind of funny. The dude cutting wood in shop class has breasts. So Halton District School Board members have reacted to the uproar by supporting the big-breasted trans teacher, claiming gender identity and gender expression are protected grounds under the Ontario Human Rights Code. That is the stance the school board is taking, and they are standing behind the teacher, said Chair Margot Shuttleworth. School staff was also in process of going through creating a safety plan to ensure the teacher's security as public outrage builds and protests were planned. So Maxime Bernier, this is a guy, okay? He tweets out, imagine a female teacher who now wants to be seen as a male if that same individual were appearing in class with a 12-inch dildo in her tight pants. Exactly. It would be equally inappropriate as what this guy is doing. You have to, ladies and gentlemen, see this picture. If you mistook Tucker Carlson, you can certainly look this up. Lady in Ontario, or dude, I should say, in Ontario, Canada, who wears massive prosthesis in front of high school students. Now, I'm trying to think of myself back in high school. And Chris, when you were back in high school, like, if you saw this, wouldn't your immediate reaction in high school like be totally, first you would like go, ha, you'd laugh your what off. And the second thing would be, you'd be super creeped out by this individual.
I'd be creeped out for sure.
Yeah. I mean, because my first reaction is like, this can't be real, but yet it is. But as a high school student, you're a minor, you're still a child, and your brain is developing, and you're like, that is just really intimidating and weird, to the point that I want to get as far away from this individual as I possibly can, yet it's my teacher. And how does the teacher grade people? It's like
when I was growing up, you used to feel safe going to teachers with stuff, and I wouldn't feel safe going to that teacher,
Well, imagine if you are in shop class and there is a written test. And you know how the teachers, when you would take written tests from time to time, would walk around the classroom? Yeah. And this teacher walks around the classroom and then leans over and looks at your test as you're taking it. I mean, there'd be a small problem with this prosthesis. I'm just saying.
Yeah.
Okay. So look, ladies and gentlemen, I don't know where we are living. And yes, this is Canada, but this same crazy stuff, perhaps maybe not this extreme, but we do have drag queen happy hour, whatever the heck it's called. Story time hour. Yeah, that's what it is. In elementary schools, many of them across the country. What is happening to our public school systems? What is happening to the point where people actually think that this is normal? I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, it's not normal. It's not appropriate. These are children. You're grooming them. You are sexualizing them. And honest to God, this individual, if anywhere, should be put in a mental institution. And so, by the way, should the school board. So should the principal. So should the vice principal. So should the fellow teachers for not speaking up. So should the parents. This is insane. And then in the Daily Caller, trans tape, chest binders, and packers, not sure what a packer is, the gender-affirming gear public schools are stocking up on. So apparently, K-12 school districts, in the U.S., by the way, are implementing gender-affirming closets to provide students with products to help change their gender identity. The items stocked in these gender-affirming closets include tucking tape. What is tucking tape?
I have no idea.
Chest binders.
I don't want to guess.
Chest binders. I can kind of figure out what that one is. And stand-to-pee devices.
Is tucking tape for male genitals, maybe?
A stand-to-pee device?
Like,
an aspect of concern is that children see the peers getting special treatment and access to these closets. And that leads to developing resentment towards students with actual gender dysphoria, which could then lead to harassment and bullying, and then contribute to the social contagion we are now seeing among our nation's children. So, folks, imagine for a moment that you live in a community and you live in a subdivision and your, let's say, 12-year-old child, 13-year-old child goes over to a neighbor's house, and the neighbor has a gender-affirming closet and encourages you to use the tucking tape, chest binders, and stand-to-pee devices, among other things. That neighbor, of course, would immediately be arrested, and rightly so. Yet this is allowed in public education today, and it is no prosecutors, no like state's attorneys are prosecuting the school boards and or the individuals who are making this possible. This doesn't belong in the public school system. Of course not. But everybody knows this. Yet no one seems to have the courage to stop it. Namely, as I said, a good state attorney would shut this stuff. He would arrest the individuals immediately. Once again, your kid goes over in the subdivision, the neighbor's house, and the adults in that house, or a adult in that house, allows your child access to these same things that are in the closet. That individual clearly is going to get arrested, but yet it's okay in the public school system. Come on. That's crazy stuff. Who on earth ever thought this was okay? And how did we ever get to this point? Well, we got to this point because conservatives, independents, and thinking Democrats, and there are a good amount of Democrats who clearly realize this is insane. They have been quiet for far too long because they are fearful, which is why people are submerged voters, right? There are submerged voters in the United States. Namely, they don't want to tell pollsters or their neighbors or their friends. They don't want to tell anyone what they're really thinking because they're terrified of being canceled. They're terrified of losing their job. They're terrified of losing their reputation. They're terrified of not being invited to the right parties, which is how this all happened. We must speak out, ladies and gentlemen. We must speak loudly this election. We must end this craziness. Please, let's end this craziness in public school systems. So next up, podcast listeners, climate change causes hate speech. That's a new one. You know, on this podcast, I've been saying for a couple of years that climate change allows the claim of climate change and the individuals who talk about climate change at the highest levels of government are using it to literally take over your life. Okay? Literally. Now, if you're willing to go and let that happen, well, that's your fault. Obviously. But here's another example of it. And we've given many examples over the last couple of years in particular, but Columbia University professor claims climate change is giving rise to hate speech. You know, the fact that you're a Republican and the fact that you want to make America great again, you are that way because of climate change. Yesterday it was hot, and that's why you are a MAGA Republican. Yeah. So, Columbia University professor Anders Leverman claimed in a research paper that climate change, whether from temperatures being too cold or too warm, of course it's, has to be everything, has caused an increase in online hate speech. Leverman wrote the article for a different employer, the Potsdam Institute for Climate Impact Research, where he serves as the head of complexity science. The study reached an astonishing, unforeseen conclusion. Americans feel well and treat each other better in good weather, and vice versa in poor weather. When temperatures exceed 86 degrees Fahrenheit or fall below 54 degrees Fahrenheit in the United States, hateful comments increased among people with all income groups and belief systems. So I just want to get this right, Chris. When it's hot out, when it's summertime, you're cranky because you're sweating when you go outside. And you're much more likely to be cranky. But when it's cold out, you're also really likely to be cranky because, you're cold and you're shivering and you're just not happy that you're cold. But when the temperature is just right, well, then you're really, really a nice person. I have only one question. How is that climate science? I thought that was just like the weather. Quote, even in high-income areas where people can afford air conditioning and other heat mitigation options, we observe an increase in hate speech on extremely hot days, Leverman wrote. In other words, there is a limit to what people can take. Oh my gosh. This is the professor. The so-called scientific study reached this conclusion by analyzing weather conditions alongside more than 4 billion Twitter posts. Oh, God. So he analyzed Twitter posts and matched that up with the weather. Leverman searched for mean tweets using an artificial intelligence algorithm that looked for language violating the definition of hate speech devised by the United Nations. Well, I'm just confused. If Leverman, the professor at Columbia, used artificial intelligence, which is an algorithm that looks for language violating the definition of hate speech, I kind of seriously doubt Twitter would be the place to look because Twitter has canceled all Republicans from saying anything that's really happening in America. So, what is considered hate speech? And this is where the Democrats love to play games, right? It's hate speech to say that, for example, you're engaging in hate speech when you say that there isn't climate change. That's hate speech. Democrats actually believe that. It's hate speech to talk about how our inner cities are crumbling and the loss of fathers in homes. That's hate speech. You're just targeting a certain group of individuals. No, ladies and gentlemen, it's actually true across all races, by the way, namely that when you don't have a father in the home, there is a deep consequence for the children. And when you don't have a mother in the home, there is a deep consequence for the children. But that would be hate speech because, oh no, it's not approved speech. So this idiot, Columbia professor, decided that they were going to do a study about this. And the interesting thing is that you have, of course, this idea, this thesis that climate change causes hate speech. And if that isn't enough, we have a couple of comments on here. One is, all professors are idiots. This has been properly verified over many decades. Another one, local Pennsylvania man claims all college professors are idiots. And it just goes on and on and on and on. But here's the thing. Here's the thing about the whole climate change industry. And this is an industry. It's an industry to pick your pocket and to take control of your life. Bill Gates decided to release a video. And so we're calling it good old creepy Bill releases a corny video. This is Bill Gates. And he explains kind of indirectly about why he has bought up so much farmland in the United States of America, which he has, by the way. So, freshly divorced globalist oligarch Bill Gates released an incredibly embarrassing YouTube video earlier this week promoting both himself and corn as saviors of the planet. He also attempted to raise awareness of climate change and its effect on his favorite crop. So, you have Bill Gates, who has bought tens of thousands of acres of land across the United States. And now suddenly he does a video about why corn is so important to the world. Then you have a professor saying that hate speech is a result of climate change or directly tied to climate change, which means, of course, you can't even criticize climate change because that would be hate speech. And then you have Bill Gates, who is using climate change as his reason for doing a number of things. One is for growing as much corn as he possibly can and potentially making billions of dollars by controlling a substantial part of the corn production farmland in the United States. And then doing what? And then telling you can't eat meat. Getting rid of cattle, getting rid of poultry, getting rid of meat altogether. And therefore, guess what you'll eat? You'll eat plant-based products that taste like meat that probably will have a lot of corn in them. Thus the reason Bill Gates has bought so many acres where there's corn. And to show you how creepy this video is, we're going to play it for you, okay? But it is so creepy because it's Bill Gates talking, but then they've altered his voice to make it sound like he's a little boy. And to say that this feels Orwellian and is Orwellian would be an understatement because it is targeted towards the dumbest of the dumbest people in the United States and across the planet. It's like, here's this billionaire oligarch buying all this land. That alone should be concerning. And at the same time, he's saying to you, you can't eat meat, and I'm going to make sure that laws are passed that make it prohibitive for you to buy it or eat meat. And you're going to have to buy stuff that has lots of corn in it because I grow it. We had that clip. Here it is.
For me, I really like corn.
What do you like about corn?
It's corn. A big corn nuts. It has the juice. I can't imagine a more beautiful thing. It's corn. I can tell you all about it. I mean, look at this thing. When I tried it, I don't anything. It's corn.
So that's Bill Gates. Literally, that is Bill Gates talking. And of course, they've altered his voice, but literally is him. It's a picture of him. You would think it's like a cartoon or something. No, it's really him. If you're not watching it, it's worth seeing.
Well, that was a meme.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly. Explain that.
The kid was like a meme, like saying like this is corn or something, but it was like it went viral, but then he took this and completely like ruined the meme, basically.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
And so he's trying to make it look like he's just cool. He's just like you. You know, he's not threatening in any way. Folks, who do these people think they are to tell you what you can put in your mouth to eat? Who do they think they are? This is when you know that you no longer live in a republic, right? You have oligarchs that are in charge of government, have undue influence on government to tell you what you can eat and what you can't eat. And then they just happen to buy all the stuff that you can eat. So therefore they just get richer. So the video, of course, includes images of Bill Gates as a youth eating corn, panning back to him today in modern times, dancing with corn in his hand as music, covered by children singing about corn, plays in the background. Only thing missing is Jeffrey Epstein, of course. Of course, Gates presumably loves corn for more than just its flavor. He also enjoys making billions of dollars of his own on developments of the corn crop and the control of the world food supply that it delivers. Gates has doubled down on gaining control over domestic and world food supplies in recent years, buying up American farmland at unprecedented rates. Yet there has been some backlash, at least, to his extensive land purchasing. And we actually reported this a few months ago. This summer, for example, North Dakota, their Attorney General, Drew Wrigley, sent a letter to Bill Gates and the Gates Trust, because Gates, of course, buys these things through trust, because it's hard to figure out who's buying it, but it's literally Bill Gates, and asked for Bill Gates to account for its purchase of 6 parcels of land, large parcels, by the way, in the state of North Dakota. And the globalist Gates continues to snatch up farmland across America. So the good news is, in places like North Dakota, you can't have a concentration of land in one, particularly farmland I'm talking about, by one individual, because that will be dangerous. That is probably a good thing, okay? A really good thing. So further, last March, Washington State House candidate Joe Kent called on the United States to seize farmland owned by Bill Gates after the tech billionaire called on America to transition to 100% synthetic beef in the name of slowing climate change. There you go, ladies and gentlemen. Can't even make this stuff up. So this past March in Washington State, there's a House candidate. His name is Joe Kent. He's running for the House of Representatives to represent a part of Washington State. He called on the United States to seize that land from Bill Gates after the tech billionaire called on America to transition to 100% synthetic beef in the name of slowing climate change. So look, I don't support seizing someone's property. That's a really bad idea, because this is indeed Bill Gates' property. What I do support, however, is limiting any one individual or any one corporation directly or indirectly controlling large amounts of farmland that are responsible for producing not just food in the United States, but food for the entire planet. That would be a good law, just like what they did in North Dakota. That actually makes really good sense. So you don't seize property. That's expropriation. You don't expropriate someone's property. That's wrong. What you do is you pass laws as it relates to farmland, because that would just make sense. But nonetheless, it's important to remind the podcast listeners that at the end of that sentence, Bill Gates, the big tech billionaire, he wants America to transition to 100% synthetic beef. In other words, it ain't beef. But I can guarantee you it has a lot of corn in it, since he bought all that land to make sure that he's growing it. He also wants you to do it because of climate change. And he wants to use corn to replace fossil fuels. Of course he does, because of, you got it right, ladies and gentlemen, climate change. Literally, this is so incredibly crooked. Can't make this stuff up, even if I tried. But that's what Bill Gates is up to. And that's why I've been saying, literally for a very long time, climate change is being used to take over your life and to pick your pocket and to control you. And the hate speech codes, like the professor at Columbia, are being used to stop you from speaking up against subjects, one being climate change, because by speaking against it, you must not like humanity. You're engaging in hate speech. And that is, by the way, the creepy Bill Gates corn video. And that's it for Mark and the Millennials. Thank you for joining Mark and the Millennials. This is Mark Fisher. Thank you to our producer, Christopher Hopkins. Check us out on iTunes, Spotify, YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Getter, Truth Social, Rumble, which just went public, and our website. See you next time.